I am so excited to have Jose Ralat with me today to talk about this incredible journey that you've had and that you share with others with tacos, Latinx food, cultura. Yeah, welcome, Jose.
Thank you.
Now, Jose, you tell me about how you got into taco studies, if we're going to call it that, which I'd like to call it that. And
Yeah.
you're Dallas based, but you're Puerto Rican, and share some of your journey, man.
So I'm actually island born, and so while I grew up in New York, and what I learned while writing my book, which we'll talk about later, is that one of the first solid foods that 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 my mom made for me was a little crispy taco made in a pan. So I guess I've I've always had tacos, but I met a girl who's Tejana, third generation, and we were living in New York. I wanted to branch out from my medical editing career into food writing, and a friend of mine was a columnist for one of the New York alt weeklies. So he got me into that newspaper through my wife's food, and she would make me eat lengua, for example, and and my mind would be blown how grassy and subtle and substantial this all is. It's so complex, and we ended up living in the Sunset Park area of Brooklyn, which is largely Puerto Rican and Irish at that time. This was more than, this was 15 years ago. Uh, and it was quickly becoming a Mexican neighborhood. So there were Mexican restaurants lining one of the commercial strips. And we just hop. We would just go into one, eat, leave, go into the next one. Or we would go to this little puesto that this old lady had on this side of a bodega. It was this little wood painted blue puesto that she opened up and sold $2 lamb barbacoa tacos, and I would just get them to go, and I would walk, and I'd do my errands, and I it's so I ended up writing about these places, and then we moved here to Texas, and I didn't have a job, neither did she. So I got a call from the Dallas Observer's editor at the time, and he said, "Well, do you like tacos?" I said, "Well, everyone likes tacos. Who does, why would you even ask me that?" He said, "Great, pitch me something." And I needed the money. Just just very simple. I just needed the money. I did not know anything except I had a wife and a kid, and I needed to make money. And the only way I knew how to do that was via writing, which is my career. Uh, and I quickly realized what I that I really didn't know anything. So friends and family would mail me books from Mexico or wherever, and I would listen to taqueros, and I quickly realized there is a lot to be said here, because a lot of this is oral tradition. A lot of these taquerias, businesses, restaurants are fleeting. They open and close every day, and no one notices. Well, their stories deserve to be told. And so my job now is to tell those stories of these people who are underrepresented via the most perfect food in the world.
Wow, so inspiring, Jose. And then you were named taco editor at the Texas Monthly, right?
Yes, that was last year.
What a journey, and what a kind of a remarkable kind of path that you've created out of out of really thin air in a way. I mean, all the hard work. But tell me, like, you mentioned the book and American Tacos, a history and guide, published by the University of Texas Press. Going from writing the journalistic pieces into a book, that's quite a process. And I know you've already shared the significance and importance of writing down our histories, our oral histories, the stories that have been otherwise not allowed to be put down on paper for us to share with others and new generations. Tell me about this research and all the work and everything that went into making this book.
So, the book took like 4 years to write and go through the editing process and the design process, but it took 3 years to put together the proposal. The proposal was a lot harder to write than the book. I had a full-time job at the time that I wrote this book, and I wrote the book in about 2 weeks, and then went back and revised after visiting 38 cities in 3 countries on 1 continent. I think why research and write on the tacos, as I mentioned, these are very important stories, and the first European language to be spoken in this country is Spanish, and that is very much the foundation of a lot of what American culture really is, especially in the part of the country that was once Mexico, like Texas. There is no Texas without Mexico. And I started to see the picture of the border as this insignificant thing, even though it changed history and it changed foodways. It didn't fundamentally change tacos, in that tacos are always regional. And so I wanted to approach this particular project via that perspective. And that, where I live, we've always had tacos for as long as there have been tacos south of the border. or what is now Mexico proper. Uh, and so I wanted to look at post 1848 and what that meant for the taco as this regional food and why it's important, what that importance means to not just Americans, but everyone, and to tell the stories, because all of this is really selfish, but a lot of this is really for my son, who is part Mexican, and and we are raising him in the Mexican American traditions, and so I want him to be aware of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he doesn't care right now, he might care later.
He will, and that's such a powerful message, Jose. So powerful. So I love this. Always a regional food, what it means to both Mexicanos, Tejanos, taco cultura, mestizo, indigenous, Tejano. Can you talk a little bit about like what that means to you?
Sure. Indigenous really is anything that is from a place, right? So chilies are very much part of Texas foodways going back thousands of years. Corn is part of Texas foodways. I think what we might not realize, though, is that how that food has changed over time. The taco, as we know it, as a food, is not as old as wrapping something in a tortilla, which has been done for thousands and thousands of years. But the taco as a food, as a product, it comes out of the mixtures of all of these things, of the indigenous, of the colonial. I hope you didn't hear that ring that just went off. Comes out of the confluence or mestizaje, right? And that fascinates me. There is nation building. There's a new cultural foundation. There's all these things that intersect within the tortilla, which is the foundation of all Mexican culture. Pre-Hispanic and otherwise. What I like to say a lot is eventually everything ends up in a tortilla. And I've also joked with my friend, the barbecue editor, Daniel Vaughn, at Texas Monthly, that barbecue doesn't reach its full potential until it's in a tortilla. Because where does barbecue come from? Barbecue comes from barbacoa. Where does barbacoa come from? Latin America.
I love it. I love it. So inspiring. And now I feel so like fully justified in eating my tortilla with like everything and almost every day, right?
Yeah.
Um, um, this actually, I mean, it's kind of beautiful segue into taco transcultura. But gosh, yeah, we're seeing, like you said, everything ends up in the tortilla, and Indo-Mex, Mexican, Asian, Latinx, Jewish, Desi, Tex, like
It is practically never ending. And I think a lot of it has to do with the taco is so profoundly American now that it becomes a gateway. Uh, it's a culinary passport to other cuisines now. Uh, the biggest example would be Korean tacos. Uh, Now, they became extremely popular between 2008 and 2010 because of Roy Choi and his Kogi barbecue KMX truck. And Korean entrepreneurs saw how big this became via social media because Choi's true genius was using Twitter uh, to leverage his business. And within 2,000 years, there were KMX places across the country. Uh, those of us who write about this food will like to have a say in what is and what isn't part of the canon. We didn't have enough time for that. It just exploded, right? Now, uh, it, in the wake of that, Korean food proper is uh, very popular. People go out for Korean barbecue. Uh, Prior to that, no. But what Roy did was take about 20 years of cultural interchange between adjacent immigrant populations who were doing what every group does, and that is trade and innovate with fellow human beings of nearby communities. And this became a natural product. It probably wouldn't have left Los Angeles had it not been for Twitter. Uh, Now, why does Korean food work so well in a tortilla, aside from the natural process of innovation? Uh, and that is essentially it's grilled meats and cabbage and things that are put in tacos anyway. Uh, so there's very little difference when you deconstruct it, uh, and that's that applies to Indomex because you have a lot of these stews and heavily spiced curries that go into flatbreads. You have all West Indian or jerk chicken, uh, highly seasoned grilled meat. That's just what you put in a tortilla. Right? I'm really enjoying the rising popularity of vegetarian and vegan tacos because that brings us back to the Hispanic, and to the idea that Mexican food is predominantly vegetarian because meat's expensive. And it breaks down the idea that a taco's got to be meat, tortilla, and whatever.
Very cool, Jose. Oh man, I am learning so much. Thank you. Lalo does this kind of, funny and this funny little cartoon panel strip. And I like it because it raises the question about hipsterism and tacos. And you had just mentioned even the kind of gentrification of your Latinx barrio there in Dallas, pushing our gente out. Tell me about hipsterism and tacos.
That's a really touchy subject for me because I think that the taco is always a place that welcomes innovation. Uh, it is both a vessel, a carrier of tradition, and this cultural signifier, right? But I think that you can innovate beyond these sort of immigrant uh, hybrids as long as you know your shit. I really think it's important that we understand that we can push the boundaries of what we think is a taco, as long as we know the foundation, the history, the flavor profiles, base recipes, components, and then we can play from there. And plenty of Mexicans do that now here, and down in Mexico. So I think there's a fine line, but there is certainly this thread of cultural appropriation, which I think is really hipsterism is code for, right? That you see in these large, flashy chains that that do nothing more than shrink a $40 entree that down to a $4 taco. I think that's terrible. That is ignorant at best and racist at worst.
Yeah, no, I know it gets me going too. Oh man. So yeah, this, I had no idea that there was even a boutique hotel that kind of themed its, taco as a taco themed hotel. But yeah, I think this authentic versus consumer really gets to that point you made about, doing your dang homework and really investing the time to understand the depth and complexity of the history and the ingredients. But yeah, how do you respond to this slide about authentic versus consumer?
Well, first of all, as a journalist, I wish I could have stayed at this hotel just to see what the heck it was like, because it is a curious thing. And the fact that I know that this sold out in minutes uh, boggles my mind. Well, what I will also say is that Taco Bell, although it stole its base recipe from a nearby business, is historically significant, right? It has probably done more to popularize tacos than any other brand. and I don't think I'd have a job without it. That being said, I don't like it. Uh, I think that it is great at marketing and branding. That is their product, marketing and branding. They're great at it. The food does not taste good. Does that make it inauthentic? No. And I would push back on the word authentic, because if tacos are regional, authenticity is this fluid spectrum, right? Whereas in the southern U.S., you have this developing style called surmex, uh, that blends Mexican and Southern American ingredients to create this new wonderful thing. Uh, that's authentic. You're also talking about the two world's greatest corn cultures. uh, so I would push back on that, but I think that anything is packaged if it wants to be sold. I, I think this is a matter of capitalism versus a more popular grassroots level approach, and for that's the lonchera that we want on every corner, versus a mid-range Mexican restaurant, which is probably family owned, uses high quality ingredients, and therefore its food commands a higher price. And it should. We should pay for what things are worth. And we should pay the people what they're worth for their labor and their time. Because, I mean, there's a lot going on here. And just on this slide alone, you and I could probably talk for hours. What do you think?
Yeah, no. Oh gosh, you've got me thinking about so much, but I love the reminder that tacos are regional, and therefore we also have to think about less of the authentic and more of authenticities. Um, but also I love your, reminder that we also have to really keep in mind the kind of the exploitation of the labor side. So, always be mindful. So less maybe concerned about kind of ready consumption like a Taco Bell, because, it exists, but maybe more concerned about kind of helping the workers be kind of paid for what they do,
Yeah.
really, really extraordinary. You also, well, of course, you've got your, Texas Monthly gig, but also, of course, a blog and your book and so many other ways that you kind of bring taco literacy to the public. Is this teaching by other means for you? Do you see yourself as in a way, a teacher?
Yes. Friends of mine who who are who are professors and academics, historians, scholars, often say that I approach everything with a scholarly eye, and my degree is in writing. What do you do with a writing degree? You go to grad school. I didn't want to go to grad school. I thought that was a waste of time. I wanted to do something that mattered more. I didn't know what it was until I found tacos, and tacos allows me to make connections, not for my own benefit, although I have definitely benefited from them, haven't I? I can't forget that, but allows me to allows me to remind people that they're a force for good, and to remind people how beneficial they are to our culture, to humanizing others, and to continuing traditions. In Texas, we almost take them for granted. It's to the point that when we worked in offices, if you were late, you brought in tacos. That was just what you did. Uh, it's part of what we do here. We argue about tacos. Who owns what taco? Why? It doesn't matter. We all share it. Here in Texas, we're lucky because we're part of the borderlands that were once Mexico's. So we have a tenuous claim. But social media is a great way of teaching. And I post a lot of bad photos of interesting Mexican foods and rare foods that otherwise might be considered fringe or novel, like like the machete, which is a large 24-inch quesadilla, corn quesadilla, that looks like that looks like the short sword. Uh, uh, People, and by people I mean not just Anglos, but those who might not, who might have these rigid perceptions of what is and is not Mexican food. Uh, because we know barely anything. We could spend lifetimes tracking down this stuff and learning about it. But I think that any avenue that I have to share the culture and the food is one I should take.
I had no idea about the machete. Now I'm going to have to go and look that up. We mentioned a little bit earlier the sort of, Latinx food fight, food and social justice. And, so it's not just eating the taco, it's also understanding that there are, hands and minds involved in creating the taco, and very often these can be spaces of exploitation. But do you see it in also in other ways that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, but like I said earlier, tacos are a force for good, and we can come together over them and hash out our problems, uh, talk about our differences that way, es- especially now with the pandemic and Latinos, Latinx groups being the among the most negatively impacted groups when it comes to COVID-19 and the pandemic, largely because we make up the bulk of the service industry, and that is an essential service. Not all states, not all businesses are requiring masks or enforcing mask mandates. Uh, that impacts us directly. It it it's almost like it's almost like they want to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think, wow, they really don't care. They want us dead, but we were here first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so powerful to think of it now and think of all of our, families that are, front lines to this stuff and in the essential industries and not being protected. And, Jose, you have also written on the history of the taco emoji. And it got me thinking about tacos in popular culture and the presence, the kind of what you're seeing there in terms of a fascination with, but also celebration of.
So I once wrote down my top 10 local taquerias. This was years ago, like 8 or 9 years ago. And I realized that all but one of those places opened up post 2008. Why is 2008 notable? That is uh, when we had what is called the Great Recession. The markets crashed, people lost their jobs, people had less money, they looked for cheaper, faster foods. And for some reason, they settled on the taco. Uh, ever since then, the taco becomes more popular with every passing year. That has included becoming an emoji, and this was highly political because the most predominant taco emoji is of the Taco Bell fast food style taco. Uh, Now, why is that important? Well, that's the most Americanized version, but emojis as a product of Japan uh, is interesting because a lot of their pop culture is influenced by American culture. So there's a link there. And what does that mean for us now? Well, it codifies what we've already known. So it's kind of boring in that regard. But the emoji itself has changed. Uh, and it has evolved depending on what platform you use. Is it Google? Is it Apple? And well, what update is it? I know now. I won't look at my phone right now, but it's not. It's not as obviously Americanized as that. Although you could argue, well, this is very Mexican too, because this crispy taco is adapted from the taco dorado. uh, which is a Mexican taco. And so you could go into this non-linear jumble of, just like, what does this emoji mean? Why is it important? And how has it evolved? And come up confused more than ever.
Yeah, really fascinating to me the way that you connect all of these regional, national sort of spaces, cultural spaces, and where in the end it's not an easy kind of, I don't know, opposition between the Taco Bell and the taco at the taqueria. Um, I've noticed, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but there definitely seems to be, at least in the last 5 years, a lot more on, in these kind of platform spaces like Netflix, cable spaces, and so on, an interest in really showcasing tacos, food, cultura, in and around, even building a whole story around this in the show Gentified. But
Mhm.
what's your kind of read on this, Jose?
I think it's good overall. Uh, I think that there are a million stories that we barely scratched the surface. I think that the story of Latinos is one of conflict because we exist between two worlds. Our ancestral heritage and this modern uh, pull to assimilate, which was what which is what Gentified is about, right? And the identification of barrios uh, 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 by our own kind. Uh, I, I'm certainly not the working class child that I was, right? I'm now at a place where I'm fortunate enough to have written a book about tacos. Like, that's just crazy that someone paid me to do that, and that someone is paying me to be their taco editor, uh, and, and that allows me to own my own home, which is a lot luckier than what some of these other individuals represented in these stories are and have. I would like to see more diversity. Uh, I would like to see more explorations of the the nuances. I will say that the Taco Chronicles is probably the finest example of subtitling that Netflix has ever provided consumers, because because Mexican slang is really tough to translate, and they did a fantastic job with that.
Wow, yeah, so amazing, so important, and I can't wait to see where all of this sort of the space of our food and cultura resonate and ripple out across other kind of representation spaces, other stories that I think we're finally, are finally reaching a bigger public through TV, Netflix platforms, comic books, one of my loves. Um, and
That's a really
yeah,
great. That's a really great thing that I'd like to talk about momentarily. Uh, Generation X, Latinx grew up with comic books. We grew up with this idea of this superhero, that is where we found re- representation in the other. And now, who writes those comic books? Who draws those comic books? There are a lot of Latinos doing that now. And that is fantastic. I love that.
I love it too, and have kind of dedicated my professional career to it. I was thinking about Eric Garcia and his Tortilla Man. I want to make sure to connect you guys so you can get a Tortilla Man
Yeah.
T-shirt because I think you'll love it. Um, Jose, this has been a remarkable, brief but deep exploration of why tacos matter. Jose, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.